Welcome to episode 12 of the Die Human podcast, where today I get to be joined by my pal to come and share his theological and scientific wisdom and wit with me. My friend Larry Chapp, Dr. Larry Chapp, is here discussing his knowledge of, dreams for, hopes for life in a Poustinia.
A Poustinia hermitage on the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker Farm.
So bringing together Catherine Doherty and Dorothy Day, two
That's
actual
right.
friends.
They were friends. They had very similar sorts of outlooks about how to live the Christian life.
Are they both servants of God?
Well, I know Dorothy Day is. I don't know if Catherine
I think they
Doherty
both
is
are.
a servant of God.
Both
She
on
is.
the path.
Yeah, very
Okay.
good. Yeah, I don't really know that much about Catherine Doherty, except that convert from Russian Orthodoxy to Catholicism, and therefore she bridges the gap between East and West.
She's got both lungs.
And hence she developed the original concept of Poustinia, which is just a Russian word that means desert.
That's what it means.
And so her retreats are all oriented around the sort of concept of the Desert Fathers, very Russian, ascetical, monastic, sort of emphasis on solitude and silence and fasting, all of that into her. And she started Madonna House up in Canada, and she has a Poustinia hermitage up there. And that's what we want to build on our farm if we raise enough money.
You want some solitude? You want some silence?
Yeah, God knows I need it.
Silence. The modern world is desperately in need of silence. Would you allow me or other people to come and stay in the Poustinia?
Yeah, there would be certain reservations about having you there, but I think we would allow it. Yeah. No, I've never actually made a real Poustinia retreat in my life. I tried once.
You tried.
When I was a seminarian at Mount St. Mary's in Emmitsburg, and most of the people that were responsible over me at that time are now deceased, so I'm free to finally admit this. The Mount had this house associated with the seminary, and it was specifically set aside for Poustinia retreats for any seminary.
They called it a Poustinia.
Yeah. And so I signed up, and I went there and spent a weekend there. But there was a delicatessen about 1 block away that sold like great sub sandwiches, and I got hungry, so I wandered down there. And on a Poustinia retreat, you're allowed a loaf of bread. This was just bread that had cured meats inside of it, and there was some potato chips. And then I had 2 seminary friends knocked on the door late at night, said, "Chapp, we hear you're making a Poustinia retreat." And they had beer and more chips, and all of a sudden, It was just a weekend of relaxation and fun. So my one single attempt in life at a genuine Poustinia retreat crashed and burned.
This is not the proper spirit of the Poustinia.
No, it is not.
And Poustinia, like you said, means desert.
That's right.
And so I guess you felt like, well, there's manna in this desert.
That's right. It's hard to feel in the desert next to a deli. So if you're going to build a Poustinia, my suggestion is don't build it next to a deli there. And so on our farm, there's no deli nearby.
Yeah, so you want a Poustinia that has like a locking door. You want like a prison Poustinia kind of is what you need.
Where the big cage comes down. No. We're sort of making light of it simply because what it shows is that, and Catherine Doherty understood this, that doing a Poustinia retreat, entering into silence and solitude and fasting, bread fasting with just tea and bread or coffee and bread, that runs completely contrary to everything about us as Americans or as Westerners.
Even in 1972 when she wrote the book, how much more now?
Exactly. And I was attempting the Poustinia retreat in like 1984, and I was young and I'm filled with idealism, but I have never had an ascetical bone in my body. I mean, those sorts of...
I had one, but I cut it off.
It's gone. So the point, though, is I need this. I need this kind of an experience, and I think it's true of most Western Catholics that we're so immersed in the world of affluence and money and strip malls and Popeye's chicken and McDonald's and internet and instant gratification. Man, asceticism is hard.
And we need it so bad. You're right. And not only Now do we need it? But even if we even inch a little bit in that direction, we feel like we've made some heroic move because it's so far from what we're used to. And then next thing you know, we've got a YouTube channel all about our life as a, as a hermetic personality that where we're selling Subway sandwich.
Yeah. So, but where we want to build this hermitage on our farm, if you've ever been to our farm, there's kind of two parts to it. The working part is down below where the house is and the barn, and then there's our immediate pasture, which has our sheep and our goats and our chickens. But if you go up a hill, way at the top of the hill, it flattens out for 2 acres, and it's surrounded by woods, and it's secluded.
Awesome.
And we're going to build it up there. So that really will be secluded. It will be isolated and in the woods with lots of critters and so on.
Yeah. And I turned that into a little bit of a joke when you were moving in the direction of talking about just like that you didn't have that ascetic bone in your body and how we need it. Like really the amount of noise, visual noise, audible noise, all that's going on right now, like it seems like it's so obviously the antidote that, all of Christian history tells us that silence is key to a relationship with God. And so it's maybe no wonder that it seems like there's an onslaught against us every time we try to carve out a little silence for ourselves because it's a threat to the enemy. I went to Madonna House in 1997. That was where like my life totally kind of changed, where I had an experience of God's merciful love, and I reevaluated everything, looked honestly at myself because I knew that there was unconditional love actually exists, and I was included in it. And so I had a willingness to do like a real deep, take a real deep look at myself. But I just went to Madonna House totally on, just on a whim, really. I had gone to the desert. I had gone to the Middle East for 7 weeks. And then my uncle, your old seminary classmate, told me, when you come back, before you go back out to the West Coast, you should swing by this place, Madonna House. Because I told him, I sold all my furniture and I got rid of my car. I just don't want anything anymore. And he's like, something's happening inside you. You should check out this place, Madonna House. They like people who don't want to have anything. So I just swung by, and I was only there for 10 days. And then I went back another time for a few weeks. And I didn't know. I had never heard anything about Poustinia. I didn't go to Mount St. Mary's and have a keg party in a Poustinia or anything like that beforehand. So I learned about it there. I didn't make a Poustinia when I was there because they usually want somebody to be there for a while first. Like, she doesn't take it lightly. It's not like the kind of thing like where you just kind of go in and you hang out. It's like she talks about the Russian tradition of how people would just kind of vanish from the town, like that somebody would just decide they're going to be a Poustinik, and they would just go find a place in the forest and they'd build themselves a little cabin. And then the word would get out that somebody was there. And if you needed to talk to somebody or whatever, this person had just gone out. And she has a whole spirituality in her book, Poustinia, which I can't recommend enough, about how what this tradition was in her Russian culture, and then what she wanted it to be for people at Madonna House. And then they set up these friendship houses around the country and around the world with Poustinias and places for people, even in Washington, D.C., to even go and have some time of silence and solitude, very stripped down with just the scriptures and just God. And she makes exceptions for that. I think there was like a theologian she talks about in the book, Poustinia, who actually had a library in there. She's very, very determined also to say that it's not like a hard and fast, this is exactly programmatic thing. Here's how you do it, 1, 2, 3. You're going to meet God there.
A strict Poustinia hermitage experience would be a loaf of bread, a Bible, and that's it, and something to drink, maybe a little tea.
Yeah, she'd have to say a thermos with
something. A thermos with hot tea in it, a loaf of bread, and a Bible. And you do Lectio Divina. You just read the scriptures. And, it's usually about a 48-hour experience of fasting and contemplating and meditating on the scriptures, Lectio Divina. Now, that's the pure form of it. But if you read her book, Poustinia, it becomes clear, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing
She's not trying to impose something. She's trying to open the door to something.
Exactly. So that will always be the basic backbone of the idea. Okay? Very, very, very limited food, maybe a little hot tea or whatever, and scriptures. But if someone wanted to come and preferred a cup of coffee to a cup of tea, and maybe a couple of scones instead of white bread, or if you're on a keto diet, maybe a cold pork chop.
Yeah, you're not going to be a stickler.
Yeah, I'm not going to be a stickler if you want to eat an old pork chop up there instead of some glutened up white bread. But yeah, and if you wanted to bring maybe some spiritual reading that went along with your scriptural reading, which I think is something that I think I would probably be inclined to do, to read some scripture, but also to read some spiritual reading outside of scripture of some kind. I would also highly recommend journaling while you're doing that, and there are places where you can buy Lectio Divina journals.
That's true.
As we were joking about before. So in other words, anybody that would come to our farm to do this, obviously they can tailor their experience to however they want.
You're just trying to create a space apart for people.
Yeah, but if somebody's, obviously then we would keep an eye out for abuses. So if somebody wanted to go up there and just, surf the internet with their iPhone while drinking, a case of beer, then that would be an abuse of the Poustinia privileges. But it's not like we're going to have Poustinia police either. I'd send a drone up and, kind of keep an eye on things. I don't know. That will not happen.
Well, this is a great expansion of what you've done, because you guys have built the Dorothy Day Catholic Worker Farm, and you've had students come and various people come and see the farm and interact.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. It's actually, it really brings together, I hadn't thought about it too much, but body and soul, because so much of our disconnect from God is that we don't actually have a connection with the physical reality of the world that he's created, much like animals and farming, agriculture, all the metaphors that are in the Bible and everything. And then we also then don't have the silence to contemplate those things, even if we have them. So like the combination.
Silence is key. Joseph Ratzinger, Pope Benedict, always said, the crisis of the modern world is a crisis of faith. And a crisis of faith is caused by a crisis of prayer. You don't have a relationship with God, eventually faith dies. In order to have a relationship with God, you have to pray. And then Ratzinger said, and the heart and soul of prayer is silence. So our whole culture militates against silence, and therefore against prayer, and therefore against faith. So is it any wonder that we see people falling away by the millions from the faith, because they're so distracted? So silence is the key.
Yeah.
It's absolutely the key. And, oh man, how hard is that, to turn off your iPhone and to simply sit and contemplate in silence and to pray? Very, very difficult. But you're right, it does combine. I mean, my wife and I, Carrie and I, are Benedictine oblates. And, the Benedictine ideal was Dorothy Day's ideal of ora et labora, prayer, and work. But there's a natural affinity between that kind of.
That's right.
That's why even a lot of Benedictine monasteries have hermitages on the property, so that those monks who desire a sort of even more intense.
Yeah, you think the monastery itself is kind of that, but it's not.
Oh no, I mean you can read somebody, even the popular Benedictine Trappist Thomas Merton.
Yeah, he was longing for.
He talks about
quiet,
that he found it really hard to pray actually at the monastery, because there's so much busyness at the monastery going on, and he struggled with. And it's something I struggle with as a Benedictine, is liturgy of the hours. I mean, because the monks pray the Psalms, and they pray all the hours of the Psalms, and the day is punctuated with that. But in some ways, that oftentimes works against having simply hours and hours of quiet time to engage in silent, mystical, contemplative meditation. Mm-hmm. And this is something I struggle with. My wife is far more faithful to Liturgy of the Hours than I am. I've always had difficulty with formal Liturgy of the Hours, rosaries, verbal prayers. I have my prayer life is very non-verbal. I'll read a scripture and then meditate, contemplate, centering prayer, that kind of thing. But you need both. You need both of those things. And so that's why the sort of the Benedictine and the more hermetical traditions coming together, I think, are needed and necessary.
Yeah, that would be a great service. When do you hope to actually get going on building?
This summer is when we want to start building.
Yeah.
We've received so far pledges and donations around $10,000.
Okay, that's great.
To get started.
Yeah,
but
things ain't cheap, unfortunately.
No, building, the price of lumber and everything is through the roof. Something as simple as there's no level spot, so we have to have this contractor friend of ours that we know who will come up there and he'll level the spot off for us and build a retaining wall and a stone pad. That's probably going to be $3,000 or $4,000 just to do that. Yeah. And so you think, oh, that's no big deal, just a bunch of rock and a bulldozer. It adds up.
It does, yeah. Yeah, I've told you that I built a 12 by 16 building, and I tried to do it pretty simply, but I used like cedar siding and stuff, and that was fairly expensive, and I had a metal roof. I don't know exactly how much it was, and I did the labor, but it was...
Well, you didn't pull any punches there with cedar siding
well,
and
the house
everything.
had cedar siding, so I wanted it to match it.
Oh, well, everything must match. Yes.
I've been humbled since then, okay?
All right. Well, okay, so that's the goal, is to have this hermitage experience on the property. And I'm looking forward to it because I need it myself, as I've said. And it'll be nice to interact with other folks who it's the thing is, if you read Catherine Doherty, and let's not have an overly therapeutic mentality here.
No.
Where this is good for us because we're so frenetic in the modern world and we need to go away from our phones. And that'll be... No. The deal is, the goal is that when you go on one of these retreats, that something happens to you.
Yeah. You don't even know. You might not even be ready for
it. You might not even be ready for it. You might have a powerful conversion experience, a powerful inbreaking of grace and the Holy Spirit that might be actually very unsettling.
Yeah, you might have a powerful encounter with evil. She talks about Satan being coming into the Poustinia.
Well, look at Christ in the desert.
Yeah, what happens in the desert?
Yeah,
wild beasts,
temptation. Yeah,
yeah. Well, have people who have been donating to it, have they been expressing an interest then in actually coming to and staying?
Oh, yeah. A very dear friend of mine, I don't know if he wants his name mentioned, so I won't. Lives up in Connecticut. Has pledged $5,000 to the project because he wants to come and stay. In fact, this whole project got started because he wrote to me and said, you know what would be great is a Poustinia Hermitage on your property and your upper field, because he's visited our farm. He goes, if you do this, I'll give you $5,000 to get started with this. And I thought, well, that's easy. Well, then as I looked into it, I realized, well, that's a drop in the I'm not making light of the donation. Well, $5,000 is a lot of money, but realizing, we might need $20,000 to do this right.
Not even to make it not even with cedar siding, you might need $20,000.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's possible to buy sort of very inexpensive prefab little sheds that you can put together, but and we might have to go that route if we don't get, that's better than nothing.
It'll be beautiful no matter. It'll be simple. Well,
the thing is too,
you can make it more beautiful.
You start with 4 walls, a floor, and a roof.
Yeah.
And then you can embellish that, and then you can add to it, and you can make it anything that you want it. But a Poustinia Hermitage should be rustic. It should be very, very simple. To that end, one of the things that is in a Poustinia Hermitage, you have a bed, you have a desk, all right, and then you have a wooden cross that has no corpus on it. And that you meditate on this, you put yourself on the cross, that whole cliche. It's one of my disagreements with Catherine Doherty.
Yeah, you like to see.
I like to meditate on the sufferings of Christ, and I don't want to substitute myself for Christ on the cross. I have never ever understood that mentality that says you put yourself on there. No, I participate in what he did on the cross. I don't substitute for it, and so I want to see a corpus on that cross, but. She's a saint in heaven, and I'm just a schlep here. So what do I know?
Yeah, maybe you'll get the answer in your Poustinia to why that she says that that you should put yourself on that cross.
Well, I know that she means that that's your way of participating in the sufferings of Christ. I'm not calling her a heretic by any stretch.
She wrote it before The Last Temptation of Christ or any movie like that was made that started to blur the lines.
Yeah, I just have never.
Humanity.
I'm when it comes to crucifixes too. I mean, I really like the exaggerated realism of a lot of Latino or Spanish that really emphasize. For example, the one of my favorite. It's actually the logo on my Gaudium et Spes blog. It's the cross painted by Grunewald, the famous painter Grunewald, and his famous crucifixion scene of an extremely realistic visual of Christ with distended limbs pulled out of their sockets, covered in wounds and the crown of thorns, mouth hanging open in death, surrounded by St. John and Mary in tattered rags, emphasizing the poverty that they lived.
Because we want to soften the blow. We always want to soften the blow. That's why the Protestants take the corpus off altogether.
We want to sanitize. And yet I want to be exposed to the brutality of Christ's murder. And that's what it was. It was a murder. Yeah. This man was murdered and I contributed to it, by the Roman authorities, unjustly murdered. Now, obviously, there's an economy of salvation in that unjust murder, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that it was a brutal act, so brutal, so ignominious, that the earliest Christians did not use the cross as a symbol. It would be the equivalent of us, let's say we had a Messiah that got killed by lethal injection, and we believed he rose from the dead, so we walked around with a little syringe around our neck as the emblem of our religion. That's what a first, second century Christian would have thought about hanging any kind of a symbol. That's why the fish, the pelican, other things were symbols of Christ. It was only later, after crucifixion was outlawed in the Roman Empire,
when people weren't actually seeing it anymore.
All of a sudden now the cross, and Constantine sees the cross, by this sign you will conquer. So it took a while for even Christians to get their mind around the brutality. Well, actually, they had their mind around the brutality of it, and because it was so brutal, they had to look away.
Yeah,
they had to look away.
So from reading Poustinia, my thought, as far as like the spareness and even the cross without the corpus, is that you're going to have in the Poustinia, you have a living encounter with God, with Christ. So you don't actually need the prompt the same way.
Yeah, it's true.
That you do in everyday distracted life.
So when we build this hermitage, we will do it the right way. We will have the cross without the corpus. It'll be Catherine Doherty's vision. Yeah. When I make a Poustinia, I will have her bring a little Benedictine crucifix that I have. It sits actually on my desk right next to me, where I do all of my podcasts and blogging. I have a Benedictine cross right next to me, which I put my hand on or look at frequently during podcasts to remind me of why I'm doing this, because it can be work. And then you need to realize, well, that's why I'm doing this.
So what about that? You're talking about silence in the Poustinia. Like, you talk and write. You're all about words and communication as far as the mission that God has given you to do for the church and in the world. So I would think you would be stretched and feeling even an extra.
It's kind of one of the reasons why I do struggle with ritualized verbal prayers, like a rosary, like Liturgy of the Hours, why I struggle with it. Because, I'm a person who all day long, I spend my time with words, reading books, doing podcasts, doing writing, words, and more words. And when I pray, I just want the words to actually stop. I want this incessant thing in my head that's always chirping at me to just shut up for a while, and my mind really craves the shutting down of words more than words. And so I think the Poustinia is going to be very good for me.
Do you already have a thought of that you want to spend a certain amount of time in there, or you just see what happens when,
I've got to play it by ear. My goal would be I myself would do like a once a month Poustinia weekend or something up there. or weekday, because a Sunday we would go to church and go to mass, so weekday. But one thing though is that the Poustinia will probably only be a spring, summer, and fall.
Not gonna have a wood stove in the Poustinia.
Eventually, we might put a wood stove in there, but
Getting up there maybe too, huh?
yeah, where it is, if it's snowy, what happens, because we're in northeastern PA, is okay if snow comes, fine. Tends to melt, go away, and then there's more snow. But if you get an extended cold period where the snow falls and doesn't melt, it all turns to ice.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty steep. And so, yeah, I just don't think that it's going to be conducive to cold weather stay.
So what does Carrie think about the Poustinia?
She loves the idea. And because she loves Catherine Doherty and everything associated with it, and she's
Is she going to spend the other 28 days a month up there?
I doubt it, but some of it. And by the way, for those who are watching this, my wife is actually sitting right over there, so
so you can laugh now,
distracting me, so we can laugh. But yeah, she's holier than I am and prays more than I do, and because she's a woman, and men are naturally sinners more than women.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, I'm a complete jerk, and
it's not really the point of this podcast, but if you need to let it out.
No, but the point is, she needs the Poustinia less than I do.
Yeah. So she's eager. To
so I'm actually going.
But she's also
I'm going to ban her
from
it. Actually.
Well, you are kind of a jerk. If you
should be banned. Remember when you were a little boy and you had a fort and you sign out, no girls allowed. Yeah. We actually had that. Yeah. We actually had a treehouse. Our neighbor friend and my brothers, we built a treehouse in my neighbor's tree, and we had a sign that said "No girls allowed."
So you're gonna have arrow slits in your Poustinia?
What's that?
You're gonna have little arrow slits in your Poustinia,
right. like old fashioned castles. No, women will be allowed in the Poustinia. Absolutely.
Well, I really hope that you're able to make it I know you're going to make it, but I hope you're able to make it nice. I hope people will help contribute to it.
I'd like it to have a Divine Mercy theme too.
Really?
There's nothing wrong with combining Dorothy Day Benedictine spirituality with Catherine Doherty's Poustinia Hermitage spirituality and combine that with a Divine Mercy.
So some St. Faustina.
St. Faustina, because and I think this is of the Holy Spirit, since we've joined this parish and you've joined the parish and Jerry Bauman is now in the parish. There's a coming together of Divine Mercy themes, and the Divine Mercy Farm with Matt and Jess Nickel. So, and I have a huge devotion to Pope John Paul II, who made Divine Mercy Sunday, Pope John Paul's anniversary.
The day before which I was married and didn't even know that there was such a thing as Divine Mercy Sunday that was happening the first time the following day.
And you make Divine Mercy crosses.
I do make Divine Mercy crosses. And I
got one around here we can see.
Crosses. Yes. There's one, I think, hanging on the wall in there.
Yeah, Carrie's going to go get it for us.
Showrunner? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, she's the page.
Thank you. Oh, that's a little one. Is there a bigger one on the wall over there, just directly across there?
Oh, that wasn't good enough.
One.
She's got to get a big one. Here it is.
There's a little one. This is a little. I'll make it
now,
bigger.
I should have brought the one we have. Okay, there it is.
There's a bigger one.
Now, the one we have at our house, and Marcus can custom make these for you, will have your family's name on the cradle. Ours says the Chapp family, and then we have the Divine Mercy, Jesus, I trust in you, up and down.
This one I made after my uncle died, who was your seminary mate.
Jerry Daly, Father Daly. Yeah, my good buddy. He and Monsignor Cregan.
Monsignor Cregan, yeah. Two old military guys.
Old military dudes. We called those delayed vocations, but in reality, they were probably in their 30s or something.
Not Uncle Jerry. He was well into his 50s.
Oh, was he in his 50s? Okay, yeah. It's hard for me to judge because looking back, everyone seemed old. All the delayed vocation guys seemed old.
I think Monsignor Cregan was a lot younger than Uncle Jerry, but he was a Marine, and Uncle Jerry had been in the Army. But yeah, I make them, like yours says the Chapp family. We have ones that say the Daly family. This one has my uncle's name on it. A lot of times people will ask me to make them for like first communions or confirmations for their children, marriages, a couple's name on there when a wedding happens. So I've been building these for, I don't know, a few years, and I've only really started like talking about them since you and I started doing our podcast together. But I want to, I build the Divine Mercy caskets, and the tagline, for lack of a better word, of Marian caskets is give faith the last word. So I carve prayers in them so that people have an opportunity at their funerals to make sure that Jesus is front and center, no matter what children or grandchildren might want or whatever they say. I want this casket. You're going to see Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, have mercy on us. That's theme of mercy right there at the center when people's hearts are open, dealing with death. And then I started making these, and the theme for those sort of is give faith the last word every day, because I've been building caskets for 15 years, and I've been seeing good deaths, bad deaths, as far as like tragic deaths, but then also people who just died terrified. And like, if we're not, like you said, in that silence, if we're not recollecting ourselves to God every day, coming to terms with it, admitting our faults, striving to do better, making amends with the people around us, that's the key to a happy end.
It is.
Coming to terms with life along the way and doing the best you can.
And the Divine Mercy prayers, I pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet more than I actually pray the Rosary.
Shorter.
Well, it's not just shorter. It's more like, and once again, bringing in Eastern spirituality.
Yes.
I've always been a very big practitioner of the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy upon me, a sinner. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And I like it's almost like a mantra, simplicity. And there's a whole spirituality from the Philokalia of the Jesus prayer, which I really am a huge devotee of. And I do the Jesus prayer all the time. And I find the Divine Mercy Chaplet closer in tonality and spirituality.
Yeah.
To the Divine Mercy. And,
Jesus,
by the way, I have fully endorsed the Rosary. Rosary is a great prayer. It's just something I've always kind of struggled with.
And Jesus, I trust in you, and Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner, are you're saying the same thing when you say either of those things.
That's right. Really. Yeah. It's very, very similar. And then also for the sake of your sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and the whole world. Over and over and over. Wow. That's a power. Think about that. Think of those words. Those are powerful words.
Powerful to the point that it was almost awkward for me for a little while, because it feels presumptuous. But that is why Christ came into the world, was so we're reminding ourselves as much as we're petitioning God in some ways, we're recollecting ourselves to his saving love for us and what it involved, and that what he gives us now to.
But people can order these crosses.
Yes.
Right?
People can order these crosses, and I want to use these crosses because, like, here we are in Scranton, and you and I have become great friends, and Carrie, and I want more people to have these crosses, not only because I have 8 children to feed, and I've got my casket making ministry and all those kinds of things, but just they're hung on walls all over the country, and people tell me all the time that it's a really special addition to their family, just to see on the wall there. We were talking about the corpus. Obviously, the crucifix holds pride of place in our devotion as Catholics, but to see that intersection of their family's name with the words, Jesus, I trust in you, when they're suffering, when there's hardship in the family, remembering that is actually, we see this again and again with the saints and in our own lives, is like, avoid suffering, though we strive understandably to do. It's when we are in the midst of it. And C.S. Lewis talks about it in The Problem of Pain. That's really when we come into intimacy with God, is when we're in need.
That's right. When you're in dire straits.
Yeah. So remembering that and reminding yourself of that by looking at the Divine Mercy Cross and seeing your name, your family's name, with those words, Jesus, I trust in you.
So we talked about putting an ad on my blog where if people bought one of these crosses, a certain percentage of the money would be donated to
the work that you guys are doing, to the Poustinia.
Specifically to raising money for the Poustinia Hermitage.
If it goes well enough, then we could do some with the food bank and things like that. Also,
and we're opening the food pantry, the food bank. I hope that goes well.
Yeah.
We got to get things going with that. And
because you guys are living close to the edge, and you're doing wonderful work. People are reading your stuff all over the place. The farm that you and Carrie have built, people are
and we ain't got no money.
Well, you've made a choice. You made a choice. You were living La Vida elbow patches there for a while, and you decided to go open the Catholic Worker Farm, and that's not lucrative, but the encouragement that your blog and your guys' farm and everything you're doing is providing for the church in this digital age is outscaled. It's not.
We do potent. Pay our bills because Carrie actually has a job. She's a dean down at St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia, And she doesn't, teach directly seminarians, but she has a lot of interaction, obviously, with seminarians. And the fact is that's an outreach of what we do as well. That Carrie,
Oh, yeah.
I have an influence through the blog and my writings, National Catholic Register, Catholic World Report, the podcasting and all that kind of stuff. But then there are a lot of people that Carrie influences at the seminary and stuff, and of course you here at the parish. It's just amazing to me that the net. It seems like a small net, but it's like a spider web. The vibration here is felt way up here.
Yeah, I told you when we were driving cross country last summer, I stopped off at a church in Kansas, went to Mass, and I ended up chewing the fat with the pastor a little bit afterwards. And he's like, "Oh, isn't that where Larry Chapp is?"
Yeah. Well, and same with Carrie. I'll be traveling someplace and run into a priest and say, "Oh yeah, I had your wife for class when I was in seminary." And it's like, "Geez, I can't go anywhere." And it's like my friend Father John Gribowich, if
Let's
he's
sell
watching.
some crosses so that Larry can have sunglasses, so he can go through the airport unmolested.
Yeah, Poustinia incognito wear. Yeah,
But that's what I'll do. So we'll set it up. What I'll do is I'll set up a web page, and I'm not Mr. Marketer, but I'll set up a web page, an extra page on my web page with like Divine Mercy Cross / Chapp or something like that.
There you go.
And then people can order it through there, and then some of the money will go toward you guys building your Poustinia.
How much? 2 cents? 3 cents?
Depends on the size of the cross. There's different prices.
We'll negotiate rates.
I promise.
And the thing is, I want people to know. I mean, I have deliberately avoided for 5 years running this blog, and I could do this easily. I've deliberately avoided monetizing the blog, making it a Substack, putting it behind a paywall, asking people, to subscribe and pay money, or even on my YouTube channel to start placing ads and that sort of thing. But I don't, in the spirit of Dorothy Day and the Catholic Worker, I like all of that to remain free. And so as we started this fundraiser this year to raise money for various projects, and I made it very clear to people that the reason behind the fundraiser is to keep the blog and everything associated with it free.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that has caused it to be more viral than some others, is because anybody can access it.
It's the quality.
So, there's a part of me where it really does cut against the grain to have something on my blog that says, click here to donate to the Divine Mercy Crosses.
I totally get
it. But I just want people to know this is not the commercialization of the blog. It serves your ministry, serves my ministry, serves our parish. And there is so much going on in this parish that's wonderful.
Yeah, and these crosses are awesome.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like we're just asking for, to Larry's, I don't know, what sort of exercise supplement you might be selling. No offense to all the people selling exercise supplements.
Yeah. No snake oil here.
Maybe we could even do something with the caskets too, because the fact is, I have a similar impulse or instinct to not want to be super selly, and I have a business. I actually have a business where I do sell something that, if I dare say so, people tell me is better than anything they've seen before. Like when I have hundreds of emails and letters and gifts from people saying like, "Oh, everybody said they've never seen anything like that. It's the most beautiful casket they've ever seen." And still, I struggle to be like self-promoting, even though that's the whole point. You can't have a business if you don't promote it.
And I have been more self-promoting over the past 2 months since we started this fundraiser than I've been in 5 years. Yeah. And that's only because we've decided to take it up a notch. Yeah. Before it was just, okay, my blog, my podcasts, and some sheep on our farm or whatever. But now we're running a food pantry. We're starting a hermitage. Yeah. We're expanding what we do with the farm itself. We're expanding what we're doing with my blog and so on. So, it requires a little more.
It seems a little bit like
promotion.
Peanut butter and chocolate here, you and me. Like I have a business selling something that people like. You're my friend, and you're doing something wonderful that requires a little bit of money anyway. So, let's maybe not be so shy about living in America, maybe actually succeeding to some degree.
Yeah. But I hate asking for money.
I know.
But that's not what this podcast is about today. It's
not
this
really. Is about
it hasn't all been a pretext to just lead up to asking for money. It really is a meditation on why we need these hermitages and silences and why we need this form of prayer in our lives. perhaps more than ever.
Undoubtedly.
Noise of the modern world. I know I need it more than ever. That's for sure.
It's not mere correlation that religiosity is going down and noise is going up, right? That's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and I'll probably be dead soon, so it's good to prepare for death by doing things
It is.
like
Well,
this,
that's actually, I mean, I hope, please God, that you're not dead soon. Don't do that if you have any say-so over it. But
I don't.
but truly, I mean, when we talk about, like me witnessing firsthand and secondhand, lots of people entering, leaving this world, it really is, the time that silence, I mean, that is the great silence, the greatest silence that awaits us all. And it isn't so foreign and intimidating. I know it's not death to sit quietly by yourself, but it's closer to death than just being distracted constantly in things. Yeah. So, and again, I think like Satan's big trick is that he keeps us so afraid that we don't go near enough things. And the biggest thing of all being the grave, to see in what ways it's actually illusory and that our fears are unfounded. So entering into that silence so that we can actually have some intimacy with a greater reality instead of just clinging to this passing world.
What's that movie? Into the Great Silence. Into Great Silence. Great
I never
movie.
Saw that.
It's a good movie. It's a good movie.
That movie.
Well, it's the whole movie is silent. I remember I watched it, and I actually was at the theater, and I had popcorn, and I had to stop eating it because the chewing of the popcorn in my own head was completely destroying the whole point to the movie. So
that's very funny.
Yeah. As you can see, only I would have juji fruit and popcorn in a movie about monastic silence.
What did he say? You're not saying anything.
I don't know. Chapp's chewing his popcorn with juji fruits.
Yeah. Well, this has been a better Lent. How's your Lent going?
Oh, very good. Actually, my health hasn't been the best, but that's been its own sinus infections, and not anything deadly, but just debilitating sinus infections, which derailed in some ways my desire to fast more and be a little more ascetical in terms of what I eat and drink. But it has turned out to be a far more chastening and ascetical having an illness.
Yeah.
So in this, actually been a very good Lent from the perspective of focusing on the things that matter, focusing on mortality, focusing on God and spiritual things. And it's been, been wonderful actually in that regard.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've set more time aside for prayer than I ever have any other Lent with adoration. And it's so interesting. And this is going to the Poustinia, how you don't necessarily feel like doing something. You don't necessarily feel like having that silent time. You can't even really see what the value of it is, and then you go into it. And Catherine Doherty goes into great detail about this in her book, not about what specifically is going to happen to anybody who goes into a Poustinia, but what the overarching kind of atmosphere that you're creating for is and what can happen within that place. It's a holy place. It's a place where you meet God. It's a place where you're attacked and all those things. And you don't know that until you actually go in. You know, you can't imagine, well, if I go in, maybe this will happen or maybe that. It's like, no, this is actually between you and God. So you have to go through whatever door it is that he's opening for you for that place of silence, the Poustinia or the Adoration Chapel. Then there, you're going to have the encounter. But we're talking about God here. So this isn't something that you get all figured out. And it's so weird how I could have been in prayer and adoration yesterday, and then today I'll be like, I don't know. And I just, if I can just jar my head, I'd be like, oh no, it was wonderful yesterday. It was wonderful. That was a potent time. It wasn't, because sometimes I used to go to adoration. I'd be looking at my watch and I'll say the rosary and I said it too fast. And now I still have another 42 minutes in there and I don't know what I'm going to do today. But I found that if you're actually able to just take the time and still yourself, she talks about folding the wings of your intellect. That's a phrase she loves to use. You need to fold. Hey, where'd you come from? You need to fold the wings of your intellect. And I know that's something that'll be a mortification for you because you got quite the wingspan on your intellect, I mean, that's a compliment. I'm a moth. I've got a moth's wingspan, but you're like
I've been educated.
Yeah. But that's right? Because what I'm talking about when I'm talking about going into silence is me thinking about what it's going to be in there and everything. No, you got to go in there and just try to be still.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Because then, what you encounter in silence
Yeah, you don't know. You
can
can't
change your life.
Yeah.
It's scary. It can be scary.
Yeah. And this is a great story that I heard. So Catherine Doherty had already died when I went up to Madonna House, but her like right-hand priest, Father Emile Briere was still there. He's the one who I think wrote out Poustinia. And he said, because she used to always say, you have to put your head in your heart. You need to put your head in your heart. And he said that she was giving a talk in France. I think it was in France. It was 2 French people. I think it was in France. And she said, and the priest who was like showing around said, could you tell people that they need to put their heart in their heads? Because that's something French people can understand, but they won't understand. Put their head in their heart. And she's like, no, you have to put your head in your heart. This is a very different thing.
Yeah.
But this person wasn't getting it. He's like, well, French understand putting your heart in your head, but not your head in your heart. But so the heart rules. The heart rules Poustinia. The heart rules in our relationship with God. And it's the heart that reveals itself in silence when the head folds its wings. So I'm all for...
Yeah, C.S. Lewis says in The Abolition of Man, paraphrasing Plato, that the mind rules the belly through the chest. And so he talks about how the modern world has created men without chests. It says the world bids us to cuts out our chest, but then bids us to be virtuous. But what Lewis is referring to there is the entire Platonic realm of what Plato calls in Greek the thumos. The thumos is that realm of the heart. It's the realm of emotions, of dispositions, of affect, and that it can be good or it can be bad. But the only way that the mind can truly rule properly over our lives is it has to enter into the thumos. All right, it has to enter into that world of affections in order to properly order them, in order, therefore, to rule the visceral Dionysian elements of our lower nature. And I mean, that schema has problems, but it's
not to my
kind of what I think.
Wings.
It's what I always thought that Catherine Doherty's talking about when she talks about the mind has to go into the heart. It's a very, very similar idea. You don't lose the mind in the heart, but it changes it. It alters it.
But you do kind of lose the heart in the mind, don't you? Because the mind.
Yeah, that's the trouble. If you raise your heart into your mind, then all of a sudden
the mind
the mind bends and distorts our fundamental emotions in ways that sort of mute them and buff off the rough edges. Whereas if the mind goes into the heart, then it has to deal with those rough edges, and it's got to figure out what to do with them.
That's awesome.
It's got to figure out what to do with the rough edges. And some of the rough edges you want to keep. Now, some of them lead downward towards Satan and horrible dispositions. But there's as Lewis also says, God is the greatest good, but also the greatest terror. And meaning that ultimate infinite goodness is terrifying. Yeah. Terrifying in a good sense. Like if you were to see infinite raw beauty, I mean, the ancient idea was, Moses and with the Jews, you couldn't look upon God directly, otherwise you would die. So when God passes by Moses, God puts his hand out and shields Moses' eyes so that Moses can't see him and die. That's the idea. There was an episode of Star Trek where Spock saw this being who was so beautiful and kind of lost his mind. And it's a similar idea here, that when the mind enters into the heart, and enters into pure goodness and the better dispositions and all of those rough edges that come to it, it has to find a way to maintain those provocations. You need those provocations. You need goodness to be terrifying and awful and unsettling in really decentering ways. But if the heart goes up into the mind, all those rough edges are gone.
Wow. That is a big distinction.
Yeah, it's something I struggle with. Everything about me, everything comes up into the mind. And so I struggle with getting the mind down into the heart. But
it's going to be a special episode of Die Human when we have the post-Poustinia folded winged intellect Larry Chapp on the show. I don't know, you might just sit there.
Do you really want me to lose all of my bad edges?
No. Well, I mean, I want God's will for you, Larry.
If I were to come on here after a Poustinia, it's like, well, Marcus, everything is just wonderful. And, if I ever lost that bombastic side of me, I don't know.
I don't know if you would say everything was just wonderful. I think you might just be quiet. You might
Just
be like, well, there's
silent.
nothing good to say here with Marcus, so I'll just be quiet. All right.
But, this is a key point. I mean, to make, there's another Star Trek episode, I'm a Trekkie, where Captain Kirk goes through the transporter, and somehow or another, half of him is transported to this alternate universe where it's bad Captain Kirk. All of Kirk's bad vices are invested in this other Kirk. And the normal Kirk, the real Kirk, the Enterprise Kirk, is left with nothing but his virtues, and he ends up unable to run the He turns Star Trek. In other words, their meditation is that unless you have this evil in you, goodness is just this milquetoast weakness, and it's the exact opposite is the truth, right?
Hollywood wants to believe that.
Yeah, the idea that somehow goodness and evil represent a kind of yin and yang, and you need both. And no, you don't need evil on any level.
You need to have a successful television show.
That's right. There you go.
But that's about as far as it goes. Let's let it stop there.
And that's why they did it that way, I guess, just to make an episode. But the fact is that goodness comes with rough edges. Goodness is not milquetoast. Goodness is terrifying. It's far more terrifying than evil. Evil is boring.
Yeah. And you don't, that's why it's constantly distracting you. Yeah. Because if you sit quiet, I remember I was a goofy, smart alecky kind of kid in a lot of ways. And I remember getting around some people. This is kind of reminds me of C.S. Lewis talking about falling in with some good people, some good boys who were Christian or whatever.
Pocket. He talks about the pocket.
Yeah, it was similar to that. And it only went this far, is that I was making my same stupid jokes, but people weren't laughing. And that was enough. That was jarring for me, because like before, it's like all my friends, we were always just trying to keep the party going, never stop laughing, never stop saying
nothing worse than people that won't laugh at your jokes, man.
But they weren't really funny. So it's like it was actually a call to a little self-reflection. So just thinking about that wasn't terrifying, but it was off-putting in a very, very small, similar way, I think. All right.
Are
so
we done?
Build a Poustinia. Yeah, I think we're done. We'll have that link up at some point.
Yes, we will.
Divine Mercy Cross,
Divine Mercy
Chapp. I will figure out whatever it is. But yes, I want to help build the Poustinia any way I can. I know I might not be here when you want to have the Prime stuff going. I'll at least build the cross, but I'll do whatever I can to help make it happen. So thanks for both of you, since now we've acknowledged that we have an audience for the first time here. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, Larry, for all the good you're doing for the church and for me personally.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing.
All right. Onward in Christ.
God bless us all, everyone.
Good night or day or morning.
All right.
So let every